Immediate Immersion Live. How's everybody doing today? I'm excited to be here. We are starting our third full week of school. Today was the first day of our third full week. It's been going great so far. Love my students, having a great time. It's been a great start to the school year. If you've already started, let me know how the beginning of your school year is going. If this is the tail end of your summer, I hope your school year starts out really awesome in a couple of weeks. Today we are going to be talking about classroom management and how to tame that chaos. So, thank you for coming. My name is Scott. You're watching Immediate Immersion Live, where we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. We'll be right back after this short video. And welcome back. I know because we're at the beginning of the school year, a lot of us are thinking about classroom management and how we can tame that classroom chaos that goes on. And so we're going to talk about that today. If you have any questions or any ideas or any comments, feel free to chime in the chat. If you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and put your ideas, comments, questions in the comment section. I check back frequently and will answer them as they come along. I don't know about you, but classroom management, when I started teaching, was a huge struggle for me 20-some years ago. I don't think in teaching school they give us a lot of information on how to actually concretely deal with all the different things that come up in the classroom. And let's be honest, some of the things that we think about, things that come up in the classroom are so far beyond that, the things that come up. I could never have anticipated the things that have come up, especially after the pandemic. And from when I started in 2001 to now in 2023, the whole climate has changed. The kinds of behaviors that I'm seeing, the kinds of responses from parents that I'm seeing. Back when I started and I would contact parents about some behavior, they said, "Oh, so sorry, we'll go ahead and take care of it." But now that's not necessarily the attitude of all parents today. And with the pandemic, we're having a lot more anxiety in students. We're seeing a lot more ADHD, or maybe it's not anymore. It's just that it's getting diagnosed more. But anxiety is really high, ADHD is getting really high, and a lot of these things are causing some classroom chaos that we really need to figure out so that we can actually teach the kids, because that's our job. And that little adage that always says discipline before instruction is really, really true. So we need to focus on that. So the first thing I want to talk about today are the rules and expectations. So think about the rules and expectations as the guideline. It's like the constitution of your class. It is not your classroom management plan. That's not it. Everything that we're talking about today is your classroom management plan. The rules and expectations are just like the Constitution. They're just a small part, and everything else goes back to those, but it's the place where we start. So I like to start with my students with expectations rather than rules. And especially if you're just getting ready to start school, but even if not, let me give you a link here. And let me post it up there. So our back to school boot camp, it's already done. We've already done the live, but you can still register for it and watch all the replays. It does include a lot of the stuff about classroom management that if you want more detailed information, you can go ahead and register for the boot camp and take advantage of that. But as I said, I start with my expectations. One of the things that I do is I go through everything that we will do in class throughout the year. I mean, I'm not talking about specific assignments, but I'm talking about all the types of tasks that I ask my students to do, like singing songs, doing story asking, movie talk, silent reading, warm-ups, all those types of things. I list out all of them that I can possibly think of, and then I come up with 3 to 5 steps, procedures that I want my students to do every single time. These are the expectations. So, for example, during silent reading, I want them to come in, get a book, or if they've already checked out a book with me, get their book out. I want them to sit down and read from the moment they get to class until the timer goes off. There are no questions. There are no getting up to go to the bathroom. There's no getting up to sharpen a pencil. There's no getting up to change books in the middle of the time. Everybody reads. It is completely silent. If you have questions, you have to hold them until the time is up. Because guess what? I'm reading too. And I set these expectations so that my students know what's going on. So before any activity that we're going to do, especially in the beginning of the year when it's new, that's when I introduce the expectations for that activity. And then we're practicing them, I'm teaching them, and I'm reminding them throughout this year, especially after a long break or when they forget. These are our expectations. This is what you do during this particular time. It takes a lot of time in the beginning of the year to spend the time on this, but it pays dividends the rest of the year because you are not wasting time then. The time that you are front loading now will help everything later on. It'll make everything more efficient. So as I said, I go through everything. What to do when I step out of the room. Let's say I have to step out of the room because my principal needs to ask me a question or something like that, and it's private, so we go outside the room. Now, the door is open, so I can kind of monitor if something goes, awry, but I teach my kids, get out your reading book. I know it may not be reading time, but that's what I want you to do. Get out your reading book and read until I come back. So that way the classroom is quiet. They know what to do. Kids are not going on their phones. They're not trying to eavesdrop on the conversation. That's what they do. They will get their books out. They will read. You train your students on all of these expectations so that when it comes up, they know what to do and they act on it. Just like an emergency drill that you have, a fire drill or earthquake drill or lockdown drill, any of those types of drills, you practice them, you rehearse them frequently so that the kids can operate automatically. And that's the same thing with expectations. So I set them up. I tell them when you come into class, you are quiet. First thing you do when you walk in the classroom is you check up on the board. I always have my warm up, whatever it is for that particular day, and you quietly get working on it. I'm outside greeting my students, so I'm not babysitting them. I am not walking around in the room saying, get started, get started, get started. The expectation is you walk in the classroom, you get quiet, you start on the warm-up right away. Whether that be, copy down the week's agenda for the week, whether that's silent reading, whether that's a little practice quiz, whether it's a reflection question, whatever it is, they know that that's the routine. And at the end of the day, or class period, they know the bell doesn't dismiss them. I dismiss them. And they need to look around their area, make sure they have their belongings, they pick up any trash, they throw the trash in the giant garbage can that's by the front door as they walk out, and they make sure that their chairs are back where they belong. Because I let my kids move around until they can't handle it, and I give assigned seats. So kids will I have some extra chairs, so kids might use a chair as a footrest, but whatever they take, they have to put back. They know that at the end of the class period, so that my room is reset for the next classroom and it's ready to go. You have to train all of these expectations. So that's the first thing that I do. And I only train the expectation before I actually need it. So we have not done a movie talk yet. We have not done a picture talk. We have not done a class reading together yet. So I haven't explained those expectations to my students yet. Because why? We might not do a movie talk for another month, month and a half. So I don't want them, they're going to forget the procedures. So I want to make sure that I teach it to them right when we need it and then review it as needed. Now let's talk about rules for a moment. First of all, rules need to be as positively stated as possible. It's not always possible because it'll make for some really awkward sentences, but try to phrase them as positively as possible and keep them to 5 or less. I forgot the guy. He won Teacher of the Year in the early 2000s. I think his last name was Clark. And he wrote a book about all these rules. There are over 100 or some rules for kids. And that is just way too many rules. I don't know how he could keep track of those rules, let alone the students keep track of those rules. And although it was a good book, and he had great classroom management and it worked for him, having hundreds of rules just doesn't make logical sense, especially with our kids having the shortest of attention spans. So what I do is I keep 5 or less rules. And these are my rules that I use. Feel free to use them, adapt them as needed. But my first one is you're not allowed to talk to your neighbor. Why? Because when you're having side conversations, you are not listening to language, and that means you're not learning. And 2, your conversations distract others from learning. Number 2, you need to listen with your eyes and your ears, meaning you need to be fully engaged in what we're doing. It's active listening. And again, if you're not actively listening and following along with what's going on in class, you're not acquiring language. So that's why those are my first 2 rules. My third rule is don't think, ask questions. Because if you don't understand, I don't know that if you don't ask a question. So you need to let me know when you don't understand or if you think I'm speaking too fast, because it doesn't matter if I'm speaking just right for the kid next to you. If you're not understanding, then I need to work on that. But again, if you don't tell me, I'm not going to know that. So you have to tell me that you don't understand or that I'm speaking too fast. So that's my rule number 3. Now, my rule number 4 is make smart choices. And I used to have that as my last rule. I had 4. I was happy with those for many years. And then one of my students, it's got to be maybe 6 years now ago, said, or he didn't say, he made a paper airplane, he threw it across the room, and it hit some kid square in the face. And I'm like, you just broke rule number 4, make smart choices. And he comes back to me and goes, I thought it was a smart choice. And I'm like, oh gosh. That's when I realized that what I think are smart choices are not necessarily what my students think are smart choices. So then I added rule number 5. And rule number 5 is all-encompassing. As I tell my kids, whatever you hooligans want to do, whatever shenanigans you want to commit, rule number 5 covers it. Because I cannot possibly predict all of the different types of things that my students will come up with doing. Years ago, when I started introducing yoga balls, when they were finished the quiz, the kids were pushing all the yoga balls together in the center of the room, and I had no idea what was coming next. I look up, and all of a sudden, I see a kid running across the room, ready to do a belly flop on all of the yoga balls. Oh my gosh, it was a disaster. So I said, you just violated rule number 5. Rule number 5, keep profe happy. I am the only one who can determine if I am happy or not. So it covers any shenanigan that my students can come up with. So that one, even if I would have said that was rule number 4, you broke, make smart choices, he goes, well, I thought it might have been a smart choice. So rule number 5 is the one that encompasses everything. I was not happy. He knew about it, and he caused the entire class to lose yoga balls. I let them sit on those things. And it was the whole class got lost them because they participated. They didn't do the jumping, but they did the gathering and putting all the yoga balls in the middle of the ones who were finished with their quizzes. So those are my rules. Now, I don't introduce the rules usually the first week of school. Why? Because every other teacher is doing that and the kids are bored of hearing rules. So I just get into my content right away. And if a kid in those first few days does break one of my rules, I will slowly and casually walk over and point to the rule that they broke and point to my list of consequences. And then later, usually in week 2, is when I introduce the behavior rules. So, in fact, it was last week, it was either Thursday or Friday, I can't remember which day it was, that I talked for the first time about my classroom rules. We had already been in school by that time for 2 full weeks and 2 days. So, that's when I did that. Did I have kids break the rules before that? I absolutely did. And what did I do? I just pointed to the rule that they broke and the consequences. Now, my consequences are really simple. I do a 3-strike system. I write the kids' names on the board. I do it with a smile. I don't do it with anger. And I don't do it to humiliate kids. I do it so that my kids can see and know where they stand. So we start with a fresh board on Monday, and your strikes last all week, and then they get erased at the end of the day on Friday. So I'll write the name of the kids up on the board who's causing an issue, and then I put the number of strike afterwards. So the first strike means they just come see me after class. We discuss the issue. It's done. There's no permanent record of this. Strike 2, they'll have a 15-minute detention with me after school. I don't want to keep them for a whole hour. I do have a life, and I don't want to spend any more time. And there's really no value in that extra time. Depending on the kid, it will either be a conference time where we can strategize on how to fix the problem. Hola, Peyton. Or it is a cleaning session where they'll clean my room. So it just depends on the kid and what the crime was, but that's what they do. But again, there's no physical record of this. I'm not contacting parents yet at all until they get to strike 3. Strike 3 in the same week now gets a parent contact, usually with email, because I like to have a written record of it. I'll send out an email. I will say, this is the 3rd strike. I gave the child, 2 previous opportunities to fix their behavior, and they can't. So can we work together as a team to try to figure out what we can do to help the child be more successful? We also get a school consequence now, which is what we call a referral. So that goes to the administration. That gets recorded in their record. They keep track of those. 3 referrals in a trimester for us gets the kid on behavior probation, where they lose all school privileges, meaning they can't do rallies, they can't do field trips, they can't go to dances, participate in sports, watch sports, any of those types of things are all out the window. I don't usually get very many kids who get there. They see their name on the board and they're like, I don't want to get any more trouble. So they have that warning up on the board. They know exactly where they stand. If I wrote down the strikes on a sticky note, the kids can't see them. I teach middle school. They don't remember. They're going to forget. And they go, I didn't know I already had one strike. That was Monday. It's now Thursday. I don't remember. Now I'm getting detention. So I let them know right away, and they have all that information right up at the beginning. So those are my rules, my expectations, and my consequences. Any questions or comments about any of that before we switch on to the next topic? Okay. Disruptive behavior. This is where that discipline before instruction comes in. We have to stop any type of disruptive behavior as soon as it happens. Otherwise, it spreads like wildfire. So, and Carrie says, all good. Awesome, Carrie. Welcome to an Immediate Immersion Live. So, we've got to nip it in the bud. So that side conversation, I see it, I address it right away. I let them know that this is not acceptable, and I tell them why it's not acceptable. If it's something that's bigger than that, I will usually have the discussion with them outside of the classroom. But usually side conversation, I'm not going to waste any more time. They know what they did. They know why it's bad. They know why I don't like it. They know why they shouldn't do it. And they know they shouldn't do it, so it doesn't take a whole lot of conversation to do with that. So I address whatever behavior it is. If it's something quick like that with the talking, the side talking, I'll just address it right then and there, put a stop to it. I stop my teaching. I don't do anything further until it stops. And then if it's something more egregious, I'll ask the kid to step outside and we'll have a little conversation. If it's a lot of kids doing the talking, or like I have a class period that they come in from lunch, and I always have to say, el almuerzo se acabó. Lunch is over with. But they still haven't gotten to that point where they calm down. So then I'm counting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, silencio. So I'm addressing everybody, and then I wait. I do not continue. I wait until I get compliance. And once everybody's quiet, then I will start. If someone starts talking, I address it and I stop again. I'm not going to teach over them, and they'll learn that by you not doing it. I know in the beginning, especially with your rough crowds, you are going to waste a lot of time counting and waiting. But again, it's you're investing for later. The time you put in now will save time later, because they will learn he is not going to go on. We're going to get in trouble, and we're not going to get anything done. And you think that the kids might think that might be a good thing, but I promise you the peer pressure will be there, that it will change, and you'll get the kids to quiet much more quickly. You won't have to get down to 5. Sometimes, like in the middle of the year, I only start counting from 3. 3, 2, 1, silencio. Whatever I need to do. But it usually gets quicker and quicker and quicker. If I have a really tough class who's really trying to push my buttons and trying to push the limits, I will do a timer. And I say, we need to get it down. Okay, it took you 6 minutes to quiet down. That's unacceptable. Next time you need to get it less than that. And I'll give them maybe some bonus points, which we'll talk about in the last section today, rewards. But you have to address the disruptive behavior. And you don't always want to resort to contacting parents right away. And you definitely don't want to resort to contacting administration right away. Find out what the problem is. Like, if a kid is acting up in class and you're having this private conversation with them, one of the questions I ask is, what is going on? I'm not asking about the behavior, because usually the behavior is only a symptom of something. It's not the thing. So I can't fix the thing unless I know it. And if I'm only addressing the symptoms, we're not getting to the root of the problem. So depending on what they tell me, that might give me an idea of where I might need to refer the student for help, or where I might need to seek help for a student because I don't know how to handle the situation that's in front of me. For example, I have a student with extreme ADHD in one of my classes, and it manifests with him being chatty. And it doesn't matter with whom he's talking. He can just talk to anybody, or he'll directly just talk to me in class. And so I have reached out to the psychologist because the parents have said this is a problem. They front-loaded me saying this is a problem. We know that this is a problem. He's got anxiety. He's got ADHD. He's got these types of things that he uses to soothe himself, which are all fine. But the talking is the big issue. I went back to the previous teacher, and she said it was also an issue in her class and didn't know how to handle it. Well, this can't keep going on. I know it's hard for him to control, but I can't keep having it go on because it's being disruptive to my other students to the point that they're talking to me about it. So I went to the psychologist. I sent out the information. And I said, I need some strategies that I can do in my classroom to help the kid be more successful, to be more mindful of the way that his actions are hurting the rest of the class. And he's not trying to do it deliberately to hurt the class, obviously. He can't control it, but there are ways that we can work together as a team to make it so that he can focus more and talk less. So I reached out to the psychologist that way. I got that information from speaking with the parents. That's where I got that information that he has these issues and what we can do about them. So find out what the why is first. Usually those conversations that I have outside the room is not about the behavior. It's usually about the why the behavior is exhibiting. Are they bored? They don't understand. They're lost, completely lost. So they're finding ways to entertain themselves. Is it something going on at home? Is it something going on with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a best friend or some kind of thing going on at school? Is it they've got a lot of work on their plate? Did they not make the team that they just tried out for? All these things are monumental issues for kids, and they can manifest in bad behavior. So finding out what the behavior is can help. So that's where I start. And then I give as many opportunities for the kid to fix their own problems. I want them to be self-reliant. I explain what the issue is. We try to find some solutions with each other so that we can be both successful and moving on. And I explain why their behavior is an issue. If I can't get anywhere with the kid, either the kid doesn't care or the kid can't control the behavior, then I may reach out to parents. Again, not as a punitive, but as this is the behavior that I'm seeing. Can you help me with this? Can we work together to get this to stop? And then depending on what the situation is, I might get help from the counselor, from the psychologist, from the 504 coordinator, or the IEP coordinator, whatever may apply for that particular student. You might also search for a buddy for that student. Ask them, is there someone in the class that you feel comfortable with that they can be your buddy to help you maintain what you're supposed to be doing in class? So that's another thing. Only as a last resort do I involve administration. And usually I don't formally involve them right away. If I know there's a problem, I may go speak with my administration for some suggestions on how to fix the issue. This happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I have a particularly tough class, my period 6. It's a level 1 class. And it's a whole wide variety of kids. I have never seen such a melting pot. I've got tough kids. I have got older kids. I have got younger. These are all 7th and 8th graders. But I have some really young 7th graders that either just turned 12 or are still 11. And some of them, even if they are 12, they are immature 12. And I don't mean that in a negative way, like they're being immature. I just mean that they're like a really young 12. And I have a few of those. Then I've got kids on the 14 about to turn 15 and think they own the world. They're tough people. And they are going to show that in class. And then I have everybody in between. I have kids who are new to the school, so they're trying to find where they fit in. And we were all clashing heads. There was bullying going on in class. There were people like, why are you looking at me kind of kids, who, those kind of things. The tension was palpable. And I didn't even know when I went to go ask administration for some help and we brought the counselor in. The counselor said, oh yeah, that's that class. Because I had 3 kids come and talk to me saying they weren't comfortable in that class. And that's not normally my class. My class is not one kids aren't comfortable being in. So I know it wasn't a reflection of me. It was the atmosphere was going in class. So we had to figure out what the issue was. I spoke to the administration and we and the counselor came up with the idea to do a restorative circle. They thought, and I agreed, that bringing the administration into the classroom isn't going to help the situation. It's going to say, number 1, that I can't handle them, and that's not what the issue was. And number 2, intimidation never usually works, especially in middle school and high school. It doesn't work. So we decided to do a restorative circle. Now, I had never done a restorative circle before in my life. So the counselor said she would come in and support me in it. And I researched restorative circles. It was for Friday. We talked about it on Thursday. That night, I researched what they were, we're supposed to get training in the spring, but I'm not trained. So I researched what they were, what the goals of them were, how they're proceeded, and we worked through that. And is it perfect now? It's not, but it's much better than it was before. But by my soliciting the help of my administration without referring individual students, gave us the tools that we needed to help bring this class back on track. So that was 2 weeks ago. Oh, yeah, not this past Friday, the Friday before is when we did that. And so it's going much better. But as a last resort, or if the behavior is so egregious, like fighting or, racial slurs or anything like that, that gets referred immediately to the administration right away. And then I make contact with the parents as well along the way. But I try to use my administration as a last resort. Any comments or questions or things you want to make about disruptive behavior before we move on to transition management? And I apologize, my dog is feeling lonely and is barking for attention. While I'm waiting for those, I'll go ahead and get started along the way. Transition management. I'll be honest, I never knew I did transitions well until on one of my evaluations years ago that they put down that my transitions were amazing. They took very little time and they were clean, they were cut. And I'm like, I don't do anything special. I don't know what I was doing. So I had to self-reflect and figure out, what was I doing that made my transitions so efficient? Because I was not aware. I had other classroom management issues that I needed to work on as a teacher. But transitions were not my issue, but they are for a lot of teachers, where a lot of time in class gets wasted over transitions from one activity to another. And typically in my classroom, we have a warm-up, we have a song, we do a word of the day, we have our main activity, and we have our closing. So we're at least doing 4 or 5 activities per class period. And I only have 43 minutes, so I am not wasting any time with that. So when I went and reflected what my strategy was, I didn't have a conscious one. I just kind of looked back at what I did. And what I noticed was it went back to expectations. I didn't give them time to waste in transitions. So when we're doing our warm-up, when we're finished with the warm-up, I click to the next slide, or before I even had slides, I am starting to talk about the next activity. So we do our warm-up. I'm going, okay, take out your notebooks. We're writing down the word of the day, and I am going right along. So they know the procedures and what they're supposed to do, and I assume that's not the right word. I expect the expectations. That's not the right way either. But I'm not leaving room for them to not do it. And my expectation is they're going to be moving right at the speed that I am, period. It's the same kind of thing when you're going to discipline a student. You are walking around the room. You see the student is not working. You come up to them. You say to them, Johnny, I need you to get to work on this. I need you to get the next 2 problems done before I come back around. Thank you. And you walk away. So you're saying thank you because your expectation is that, yes, he's going to do what you just told him. And you told him you'll be back to check in a minute. So you're assuming by that thank you. It's the same thing for me for transitions. I'm assuming that they're going to be with me. And they will learn to be with me because I move quickly. So they do that. Now, if that doesn't work for you, though I would stress that you might try to get that to work for you. Try that, work that into your system. The other way is to have some kind of thing that you have kids do during the transition to keep them from talking with each other and to keep them moving. So a couple of things that I have seen. I've only used one of these, and I haven't done it in many years, but I'll tell you a couple of the things. So the first thing I saw years ago when I first started teaching, a teacher would have them count in the target language to the tune of the Happy Days theme song. The 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock rock, that one. So the kids couldn't talk because they were all singing, uno, dos, tres. I can't count to that beat, but they had it down and they would be counting in Spanish to that beat of that song. And then by the time they got to whatever number she assigned, they had to be ready for the next activity. So that can work. Do some kind of rhythm. They could do a clapping rhythm or some kind of rhythm to get them. And when that rhythm stops, they need to be ready to be transitioned to the next activity. What I did was I had a competition for certain things, how quickly we could get the transition done. So if we were working on Chromebooks, how quickly can we transition? Get your Chromebook closed, put away in your backpack, and get the next activity out. And so I would set up a timer and I would keep a record on the board, and every class would try to compete to see who did it faster. So that's the other way that I have done it. I haven't had to use that in many years. It's been many years since I've done that one because my kids just know my slides are changing. We are moving. The train is going. You need to hang on because we're moving along. And that has worked best for me. And I can get through my transitions relatively quickly. We are not wasting a lot of time on transitions at all. Does anybody have any transition ideas that they do that work in their classroom? If so, share in the comments or the chat. And if you're watching on the replay, share in the comments. I'd love to know about them. Transitional wraps. Yes, Matthew. That's similar to that little the counting to the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock rock thing. So yes, having them do some kind of rhythm, some kind of rap, anything like that, do a little dance or something to get them into the next part is really a valuable thing. It keeps them occupied, their brains occupied, their bodies occupied, and their mouth occupied, so they're not chatting with their neighbors. Because once they start chatting with their neighbors, that is hard to stop. It is very, very hard to get them to stop. So that's another great idea. Thank you for sharing, Matthew. So the next topic is promoting respect. So a lot of teachers like to demand respect without earning it to begin with or giving it themselves. You have to give respect to get respect. So I treat all of my students as adults until they show me that they're not. And I know another teacher, when I first started teaching middle school, I came from high school for 12 years, and then I came into the middle school world, and I had my first set of 6th graders, and they terrified me. I have never dealt with an 11-year-old before. I didn't know. The younger kids terrify me. I could never do elementary school, and 6th graders were not much different than elementary school kids. So they terrified me. I didn't know how to work with them. I worked with 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds for all of my career. So I did the only thing that I knew how. I treated them like adults until they showed me they weren't. And guess what happened? They rose to the occasion. It was especially evident because I had one class that was mixed, 6th and 7th grade. Normally we try to keep the grades separate, but this was one class that was mixed, 6th and 7th grade. And my 6th graders in my pure 6th grade class were very immature, very elementary-ish. Again, not in a bad way, just very young is what I'm trying to say. And the ones that were mixed with 7th graders acted more like 7th graders because they didn't want to stand out. And this other teacher called me out saying, you treat them like adults. And I'm like, I do. I don't know what else to do, but it's working for me because I'm getting my kids to do what they need to do. My kids, like the other teacher was telling her 6th graders, please everybody take your backpacks and put them on the side table. Get your supplies that you need, but you need to have your backpack on the side table because they're distractions. I've never had to do that. Never had to do that. I do it with my 6th graders. I've never done it in my career because I treat them like adults until showing not. Her kids would act very babyish because of that. She would have things taken. They would take her markers. They would take her magnets. They would take all kinds of things because she was treating them like babies, and that's the kind of behavior she was getting. So I gave them respect. I treated them all equally, regardless of any previous behavior issues they had, regardless of their age, regardless of their grades in my class. I looked at them as human beings first, and everything else came second. And then I got what I gave. So they treated me like I treated them. We treated each other fairly. I did not baby them, and they did not harass me as a teacher. We got a good thing going. We built relationships together. We became a community. We became a team, and we worked together for the betterment of the class. That's what it means to promote respect. You can't demand it. You can't fight it. You can't, raise your voice and scare it into kids because all they're going to do is close themselves off, build a wall, and butt heads with you. And I'm not saying by any stretch of an imagination that I am an expert with dealing with kids, because I am not. I learn every day. But one of the things that I know I do well is build relationships with the majority of my students. And so kids in my classes that other teachers talk about as being behavior problems generally are not in my classroom. That's not always the case, but a lot of times it is, because I work really, really hard to promote the respect and build the relationship with my students. I had an example of a student last year. I have him again this year. I love the kid. But in his 6th grade year, he was kicked out of almost every class. Most of the class periods, all of them, didn't matter what was being taught, he was standing outside the classroom most of the periods. He just wasn't doing any work. He was causing all kinds of issues, and it became problematic. So I didn't know that going in, but I had the kid last year, and I built a relationship with him and everybody else in that class. The class was a class of challenging students, and I never had to kick him out for that. He did get a couple times in trouble where he had to go to the office, but for the most part, he's been in my class, and he's back in my class again this year, and he's just as amazing as he was last year. And the kids go, and the other teacher said, "You're not having trouble with that kid?" "No, not at all." "Nope." I mean, the normal kid stuff, yes, but not the stuff where I'm having to kick him out of class or he's got to stand outside my room waiting for me to talk to him. That's just not the thing. Why? Because I built the relationship with him. I've got a young lady this year, and she was standoffish, let's say, to begin with. She goes by a different name that's in the grade book. And I always announce at the beginning of the first few days, if you go by a different name than I read off my roster, please let me know what you want to be called so I can change it. And she didn't say a word to me. So I called this kid, never answered. I marked him absent on day 1. Called again, marked him absent on day 2. Called again, marked him absent on day 3. And I ask on the first few days, I go through my roster a couple times to make sure kids don't straggle in late or that they didn't hear their name being called, because I don't know faces yet at all. So I called, and at the end I go, "Is there anybody I didn't call?" All those kinds of things. I do all of that. Nothing. So about 5 minutes into the 3rd day, I get a call from the attendance office and asks if that student is in class. I go, "Hasn't been in class yet." I called the name a few times, all 3 days, and nothing. And then the teacher, the attendance lady says, "Try calling out this name." And it was a different name that was on the roster. And I called out that name, and the student answered. So that student didn't even tell me that they went by a different name and accepted being absent for the first 3 days of school. So now I know that. And I know the type, and they warned me. After that, I had a conversation with the attendance clerk, and she was telling me, "Oh yeah, they're not going to acknowledge the other name, blah, 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 blah." It's not even a transgender thing. It's just, for whatever reason, goes by a different name. I don't know what the reason is, but whatever it is, it's fine. But I knew that I had to build that relationship and build it early. So when I see her walking through the halls or going to their class, I make it a point to call out and say hello and call her by her name. I make it a point to joke around with her, to build the relationship with her. This girl does not like school, doesn't come from the best home life, and I want her to feel comfortable in my class. And we've been working on it. I get smiles from her. So it's something that we're doing, working together to build those relationships. That is probably even more important than rules and expectations, is building relationships with kids. Because if you don't have a relationship with a kid, they're not going to do anything else for you, whether it be behave or do work or anything else. So you can't force it on. I couldn't yell at her for not tell me that her name was a different name. I couldn't yell at her and build up a wall for letting me mark her absent for 3 full days. none of that would have worked. It would have just built a wall between us that would have been harder to tear down. So, promoting respect. Again, you have to give it to receive it, and you also have to earn it. You can't just expect it. And the last thing I want to talk about are rewards. Now, I know, if you're a conehead, Alfie Cone, that you're against rewards. And I get it. I don't like the everybody gets a trophy mentality. I think we're starting to reap the problems of that now. That's where we have a lot of issues and behaviors that we didn't have before, because everybody thinks they deserve a trophy no matter what or how much they worked for it. So I get that point. But I have found in my career, I think I started giving out rewards in my second year of teaching. So it's been over 20 years I've been doing rewards. It has helped my classroom management. And I'll tell you that I have a class. It's my class of challenging students. These are what I call my disenfranchised kids. They don't do school well. They get in trouble behavior-wise. Lots of them have 504s or IEPs, usually for some kind of attention issue. And so lots of issues come up with these kids. But this year, these kids, when they found out that I am giving them points for doing good things in class, they are competing. They are grabbing. They are like, throw bird seed in a pool of pigeons and watch them all swarm, trying to get these points. I have a table in the front of the room where I keep my computer, and they all swarm it and pull their chairs right up to my table. So I don't miss that they're the one answering the question or asking a question, so they get the maximum points. I have never seen kids so excited for points than this class. I have used points for over 20 years, and they have always worked. But to these kids, it's like I'm giving them gold every single time. I used to use paper points, and I used to just physically hand them out. I cut them out of paper. I had them in my pocket. I would hand them out like candy. I never kept track of how many I handed out. They were responsible for keeping track of them, just like once the bank gives you money. If you lose it, it's all on you. I don't worry about it. And then kids could use it to buy rewards. I do the same thing now, but I was introduced to Class Dojo. I've known about it for a few years, but I never found a way to work it into my classroom. And then our French teacher's been using it for most of her career, and she did a training in our PLC about it. And so I tried it with my disenfranchised kids last year, and it worked well. And it worked so well that I said, well, I'm going to add it to all of my classes. So we transitioned from the paper points over to the Class Dojo points. And so that's what I use. And I work through Class Dojo. If you don't know, Class Dojo is a point system that you can give positive points and negative points. It's an app on your phone or a web page. So I set up my class. They all have little monsters, little avatars that they can dress up and make look like they want to look like. And then I give them positive points or negative points. Positive points can range, from 1 to 5 points. Negative points, I only take away 1 point for a negative point, and I don't take away a lot of negative points. But I have a whole bunch of categories they can earn points for, so that I can track them and see on a particular student, why do they have so many points? What are they getting their points for? Is it because they're answering my questions? Is it because they're asking me questions? Is it because they're dressing up for school spirit? Is it because they're here every day on time? I give points for all kinds of things. Everybody gets a chance to earn 1 point a day for just showing up to class on time. I give it to everybody who's there on time. And then if they're tardy, I will subtract a point. I don't subtract a point for being absent. They just don't earn a point for that. And then I give a point for asking questions. I give a point for answering a question. I give 5 points for winning in a game. I give, 3 points for being second place in a game. Then I give everybody else 1 point for playing in the game. So they get all these different points. And every once in a while, once every couple of days, I'll show them the web page with the class so they can see how many points each person has. And then they like to see the rankings. So I'll do the rankings for all time to see who's got the top, and I go over the top 10. I'll even, on my weekly emails I send to parents, I will say, here are the top 10 kids in my class with the most points, so that they see if their kid is getting called out in a good way. So they keep track of these points. I like this because now they can see it. It is a visual reminder. They get excited about these points and they don't lose them. And then I have a reward system that they can use to buy things in the ProFace store. So they'll fill out a Google form with my rewards in there. They can see how much a reward costs, and then I will deduct the points and give them the reward. Most of the rewards cost me nothing. They could be like skip a homework pass, or skip a quick write, or skip a book report, or drop a quiz pass, or a good email home, or get to choose your seat for a month, or get to reserve a yoga ball for a week, or sit at ProFace desk for a day. All different kinds of things. So they have the reward system. They can go in when they have enough points. They can buy them by filling out the Google form. I get the email. I can give them the reward, and then I can subtract the points from their class dojo. It works really, really nicely. I also give points for doing their monthly jobs. One of my jobs is the payroll clerk, so that student will give the kids the points for their jobs at the end of the month. So they'll go through my job list. They'll see the job each kid has. I have the jobs listed in Class Dojo with the points associated. They just click on them and sign the points. So it works really, really well. And then my kids really like using it, and they can buy these rewards. And the only thing that costs me money is I buy them a snack. The snack must be $3 or less. And then I will buy them a snack. So it works really, really well, and it incentivizes them to do better. And so one of the ways we talk about that disruptive behavior, one of the things I do is I'll talk to the kid and I'll say, if you can stay quiet for 5 minutes today, 5 minutes, I'll give you 3 extra points. Or if I don't have to talk to you about your behavior at all class period, I'll give you 10 extra points. So it's a reward system. I'm trying to be positive and not punitive. Now, I do have punitive things in there. If they curse or say something inappropriate, it's -1 point. If they're tardy, it's -1 point. If they're off task, it's -1 point. But I am not watching for those. I don't give out, even though I might see it, I don't give it out every single time. When I do, it does make a ball of negative sounds so the kids can hear it. And they can hear the ding when I'm giving positive points. Positive points will acknowledge. So on the screen, it will show them who got the positive point. On a negative point, it doesn't show on the screen. It'll just go bonk, and someone got a negative point, and it will say what the problem was, but it won't call out the student. So I really like that system. Some teachers don't use the negative points at all. They just stick with the positive points. Whatever works for you. But for me, I like using both. But I'm giving 10 times the amount of positive points that I am giving negative points. And just quickly before we wrap up here, let me go ahead. I didn't plan on doing this, but let me go ahead and do it here. Bear with me 1 second. I need to open up a screen. Let me get one up here. Okay, where did that go? again. I'll just show you what my class dojo looks like. There it shows. Okay, now I can show it to you guys. Move the screen down here and go to my class dojo. So here's that class, and I'm going to go to my screen share. So here's that class. I told you the kids get really excited for the points. So you can see all of the points that the kids have here. I have got my top 3 are Jonathan, Crew, and Parsa. They are so excited and they're trying to beat each other, trying to get the most points in there. So you can see all the different things that, how many points they got. They can see what they're doing. I can show them the screen. They can log in themselves and see it. But you can also see what I give points for. Let me click on here. So you see I've got the points for all the jobs listed in here. I've got points for I read silently, coming to class on time, writing 75 or more words on a quick write, doing school spirit, speaking in Spanish, first place, second place, third place in a game, working hard. So you can see being on task. Most of these are jobs that they do. Here's answering questions, asking questions. Those are all jobs, jobs, jobs. First place in a game, job. Reading silently. So if I'm seeing my kids aren't reading silently during silent reading, I'll start giving out the points for the kids that I do see silent reading. I'll walk around as I'm reading with my phone in my hand, giving the points away. Being on task, being on time, school spirit, quick writes, places in games, spoken Spanish, that's a job, teacher's assistant, and then working hard. And then my negative ones are blurting out, cell phone usage, disruptive behavior, inappropriate language, not in seat, off task, talking, or tardy. So again, I don't use most of these most of the time. I do keep track of the tardies because we have to keep track of them at school. So I do keep track of them here. But most of these I don't use that often, even though they might do it. I might do it every second or third time. But I really like this. It's a free app. You can connect with parents if they want to connect so the parents can see the information as well. They'll only see the information for their student though. And it's been working really, really well. And my kids like making their little avatars and they like dressing them up however they want to do that. So it's just a fun little activity. So if it's something you want to use or however you do participation points, I was never one who could do it with carrying the clipboard around on a seating assignment and then putting the points down on paper. That was never me. I never carried a clipboard around. It just was not my style. I used to give out paper points. But since then, I moved to Class Dojo, and I'm liking it. So, any questions or comments while you're thinking about that? Let me go back to where we were. Let me tell you, we have our Comprehended Conference. It is coming out in February of 2024, but super early bird registration is ending this Thursday, the 31st. So a 3-month pass to the conference. You can buy 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. Starts at $79. Right now, it will not get any lower than that. So if that's something that you're interested, you want to jump on that quickly before the price goes up to our early bird, which will start on September 1st. Let me pop the link in here, comprehended.co/register. Here is the link for that. I dropped it in the chat. if you're interested in joining us. It is a conference that is mostly pre-recorded, but we also do live sessions on Saturdays for the 3 months, February, March. It goes from February to the end of May, middle of February to the end of May. And then afterwards, if you bought a 6-month or a 9-month or a 12-month, you'll have access for that level of time. You can always watch the replays, watch it as many times as you'd like. It is our 5th or 6th year. I can't remember how many years we've been doing it for. We are the original online comprehensible input conference. We started before the pandemic, before it was cool. So if you'd like to join us, we get usually a dozen or more presenters, and we usually have about 30 to, depending on each year, 30 to 80 hours of professional development that you can do. If you found today's information helpful, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. We're so close to our 1,000 subscribers, and I would like to get there sooner than later. And share with other teachers if you know someone else who can benefit from this information. Next week, what are we talking about? I gotta check. We have it here. Next week, we are talking about differentiation in the language classroom. So that'll be next week, same time, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. And the week after that, we'll be talking about assessment strategies. So you have an idea of what we'll be talking about in the next couple of weeks. I hope to see you then. Unless you have any other questions or comments, I will wish everybody a good night, and I will see you next week. Have a good day, everybody.